Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tutor, I Hardly Know Her. I am one of your hosts. My name is Garrett. We have another host. Her name is... That's where you come in.
Emily.
I just thought you forgot her name.
I can't remember her name. He did. That was his way of covering it. He actually hasn't known my name for the entire friendship, but it's one of those things where we've known each other so long that he's like, ugh, it's a little awkward if I ask her name now.
It's like, what, 8 years later?
Yep.
Emily is her name. Got it.
I just refer to her, hey, Jeff's wife.
Mrs. Jeff.
Hey, Mrs. Jeff, how you doing? And I always thought it was just a cute nickname.
Mrs.
But no,
Jeff.
the dark truth comes out.
And then we have Jeffrey.
Hi.
Mr. Jeff.
I
Hi,
call him
guys.
Mrs. Emily.
Mrs. Emily is here.
Hello.
Hello.
It's so weird that I've known you guys for so long and don't know either of your names.
I mean, you and I, it's going on 10 years now.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm so old.
Yeah. We're all old guy.
We're all old now.
Ugh.
This is life
Dang
now.
kids.
Yeah. I constantly yell at kids to get off my lawn.
I bet
I
that's
have a
such
whole
good
collection of
feeling.
softballs and baseballs in my house.
Those dreaded
So-
kids can't have them back.
So this is our podcast, Tutor, I Hardly Know Her.
We
We
talk
have a
about the
topic that we
tutors.
talk about every week.
Except last week. We're sorry.
I am sorry.
Yeah.
But a lot of things just came up all at once.
Yeah. So sorry, guys.
But we're back. It's
But hey,
Mother's
we're gonna
Day.
make-
So
We're gonna
happy
make
Mother's
this one pretty
Day.
good. Yeah.
Yay.
Mom's Day.
Woo.
So Emily, what are we talking about today?
We are finally going to talk about my favorite historical figure, Jane Boleyn.
Who's that?
She is the wife of George Boleyn and the sister-in-law of Anne Boleyn. And she was the subject of the book giveaway that I did.
Well, all right. Let's get into it.
Are you ready to rock?
Yes.
Let's rock.
Let's do this. Let's get learned.
Let's get learned. Let's make that a t-shirt. I would wear that t-shirt. But would
We
we
would.
spell it L-U-R-N-T?
Learnt?
Yeah, turnt. Let's get turnt.
With
That's
a
it.
bunch of emojis on it, 100%.
I think
fire,
that's what they're
fire,
saying.
fire, fire. A little Henry emoji.
Ooh, where's the Henry emoji? It's just an axe. I think they have that. Yes, Jane Boleyn. So let's talk about her. So Jane was born around 1505. They don't really know, but that's an accurate guess. That's as accurate a guess as they can make, and by they I mean historians and not me. She was born to the Parker family. Her father was a baron, Henry Parker, and his wife was Alice St. John. And she was related to Henry VIII because everybody was related to Henry VIII. But if you were
It's
too
like that.
closely
It's like
related,
the Kevin
he-
Bacon game.
What'd you say?
It's like the Kevin Bacon game.
It is the Kevin Bacon game. Yeah, so it was cool to be related to him unless you were like a first cousin or second cousin because then you died. So, the Parker family had actually been on the losing side of the Battle of Bosworth, and that was the battle that ended up with the Tudors on the throne. So the Parker family had actually been on Richard III's side. But they quickly were like, okay, we'll be loyal to Henry. Sorry. So they did. The family was well connected. They were wealthy and they were politically active. So that all boded well for Jane. So, before she was 15, don't know how long before, but before she was 15, she was at court. She was one of Catherine of Aragon's maids, lady maid people. And she went to the Field of Cloth and Gold in 1520. Did I ever talk to you about that, Garrett? I did?
No.
Okay. So the Field of Cloth of Gold was this big, extravagant affair where the French and the English got together. I think it was near Calais. But it was this crazy... They built like a mini village with tents made of cloth of gold and like fountains of wine and It was just a big ass party to celebrate their newfound friendship, which they quickly ended because they were very fickle back then. It was probably the French's fault, to be honest.
So they just made like a tiny little village for a rager?
Not even that tiny, but yeah.
Okay. Wait, so how big was it?
Pretty big. The entire court was there. So it was a couple thousand. Like, Catherine of Aragon had a couple, like 1,500 people just in her household. And Henry had more.
So
then there were the
I know it's a running
courtiers.
joke, but this is 100% a movie idea. Like a movie about the biggest rager in the era of Henry VIII.
I could see that as like a Knight's Tale movie.
Like with a lot of anachronisms and stuff, and like it's played very silly.
Yeah, and there'd be modern music in it.
Oh my God, yes.
I thought we already covered that with the stillness stuff about the people who couldn't stop dancing.
and then there's a group of peasants who want to try and sneak their way in. It's like a
Ooh.
weird teen sex comedy.
Ooh, that'd be fun. I'd
Okay,
support. Who are we
copyright us.
Who are we casting in this movie?
Michael Cera.
Ew, I would not see it just based on that. Get Michael Cera out of there.
Michael Cera plays twins, so there's two of them.
Oh, you're making it worse. Stop. No Michael Cera. I banned Michael Cera from my field of cloth
it
of
wouldn't
gold.
be. It'd be Michael Cera, and then next to him
No.
Jesse Eisenberg.
Nope. Guys, you know who's got to be in
yeah,
this
they're
movie?
the twins. Okay, that's even better.
Guys, no. Let's remove the teen aspect. You want to know who is going to be in this movie?
Who?
Jason Bateman.
Mm.
Like playing Jason Bateman, but in this historical time period. I would.
It sounds like we're
1,000,000
just trying to make Arrested Development season 5.
No. We get rid. Michael Cera is not there. Michael Cera is crap. And so is Jesse Eisenberg. They are not in my movie. I forbid.
Today
it.
I learned Emily really hates Michael Cera.
He's obnoxious. I don't like
I think
him.
he does all right.
Sorry if you're listening, Michael Cera. I don't like the roles you play. You're probably a lovely person.
Okay. Oh. Well, I guess that's all right.
Yeah, I think Jason Bateman should be in this movie, and Alan Tudyk. I would see that pairing in a
He
heartbeat.
was already in Knight's Tale.
I know, that's why he's perfect for it.
He's in everything.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, he really
Especially
is.
lately.
Alan
Okay.
Tudyk and what's James Gunn's brother name?
Sean Gunn.
Sean Gunn.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes.
That actually really.
God, I love him.
He plays some guy who's like trying to be a knight, and he like just keeps falling under the weight of the armor. That'd be a good one. This is gonna be a good movie, guys. There's probably some Hollywood
Anyway.
exec listening to this, and he's like, "Ooh, that's a good idea," and he writes it down. And in 5 years, we're gonna see this movie and be like, "Hey,
Wait a second.
wait a moment."
If Kevin Smith can make movies based on podcasts, damn it, we can too.
We're just as good as Kevin Smith.
I want that to be a quote.
That's our standard
Well,
measurement. Kevin Smith.
That's our tagline on all of our podcasts. Tudor hardly know her. We think we're as good as Kevin Smith. Anyway.
Okay, back to Jane. So there are no surviving portraits of Jane, but she was probably very pretty because she was chosen as a
Everyone
lead.
said so.
We'll take their word on it.
She was like the Regina George of that time period. They're like, I heard she does car commercials. We don't even know what a car is. So the Regina George of the 1500s, she was chosen as a lead in the Chateau Vert play, which is Green Castle, in 1522. And that's also the one Anne Boleyn and Mary Boleyn were in. Ooh, I haven't done an episode on Mary Boleyn. I'm writing down episode ideas. And I realize we haven't done one about Mary Boleyn. Sorry.
I really like the Boleyns.
There were, I do, but Jane wasn't a blood relative of them. She just married into the family.
Gotcha.
So she was chosen to be a lead in Chateau Vert. She was chosen as Constance. So there was Constance, Perseverance. Anne Boleyn was Perseverance, which is pretty amusing. Mary was Kindness. And so in Chateau Vert, there were 7 maids, and they were being held in a captive by 7 women who represent bad sins, like, greed or whatever. And then the knights had to free them, and Henry VIII was one of the knights. So some people think that that's how Henry VIII first saw Anne Boleyn, and the show The Tudors portrayed it like that. But this was before she kind of caught his eye.
So there were 7 women locked up,
Yeah.
and somebody had to go free them.
Yeah.
This sounds like a video game.
It was the original Mario. And then they'd free them, and they'd be like, "Oh, sorry, your princess is in another castle." That's what everybody said to Henry VIII whenever he got divorced. They're like, "Sorry, Henry, your wife is in another castle."
A little midget with like a mushroom on his head just runs up
Off
to
with
him.
this toad's head.
So, in late 1524 or early 1525, she married George Boleyn. And the Boleyns, George Boleyn had actually been a part of Henry's posse for a while. So when he was a young boy, he was one of his pages, and he impressed him, and he was like, "Hey, you're going to come hang out in my privy chamber."
When did he marry? When did she become part of the Boleyns?
They got married late 1524, early 1525. So before Henry and Anne were even a thing.
Okay, so like we're not sure on the exact date. Okay.
But Jane's father kind of did what he could to ensure that she would be protected if George died. So in those days, if you didn't get a jointer, then if your spouse died, you might only be left with whatever he had decided to give you. So in some cases, it could be like furniture, and if he really loved you, maybe like silver gilt or whatever. But her father, Lord Morley, the Baron, he made sure that she would be looked after if they died. That was like in the contract. So when they got married, Henry was like, "Congratulations, here's a manor," and he gave them Grimston Manor. And then in 1529, George became Count Rochford. She's Viscountess. He's Viscount. So he would be Viscount Rochford, and she became Viscountess Rochford. So she was referred to as Lady Rochford, which is the name you love so much, Garrett.
I do.
Rochford.
Rochford.
Henry VIII also gave them the Palace of Beaulieu. I think that's how you pronounce it. And they had it as their chief residence. So you know how we were talking about how in the last episode some places actually had bathrooms?
Mm-hmm.
This one did, and they had hot and cold running water.
That's luxury.
Yeah, it was decorated with a really extravagant chapel. They had carpets, which were a big deal. There was mahogany furniture, silverware, and they even had a tennis court. And I think I mentioned in the entertainment episode that tennis courts were expensive and difficult to upkeep. So that
Plasma screen TV, home
did.
theater system.
They even had a
works.
bowling alley. Actually, some places did have bowling alleys because they played a game called bowls.
What?
Yeah, there's a game called bowls, and it was essentially bowling.
All right.
Yeah. Now you know. Okay, so for anybody who knows a little bit about Jane Boleyn, there's a lot that is said about her, and this is kind of why she is my favorite historical figure. A lot of people say that Jane was like this evil harpy of a woman who hated her husband, and that they had a really unhappy marriage, and so Jane went and tattled on Anne Boleyn and George because she hated them so much she wanted them executed.
Oh, damn.
That it's annoyingly considered the truth. And even today when I was doing research, some people were presenting supposition as fact, and it really irritated me. So it all kind of starts with the marriage. It is commonly thought that George was gay and Jane Boleyn hated him, and they had a really unhappy marriage.
Was that a thing that was pretty common back then, or
being gay?
Yeah.
No, it was a sin.
Well,
I mean,
yeah, it was a sin, but like on the DL, was that like common?
I mean, here's my thinking. Being gay doesn't change with like the history. Like, we don't have more gay people now than we did back then. It's probably
Right.
just nobody would talk about it back then. And
There's probably not like real statistics you could really figure
No.
out to know if that was true or not. I'm sure back
So, like-
then there were a lot of them probably way more afraid to even say they were.
exactly, because it was a sin, and you could be beheaded for it.
Yeah.
So
I guess I'm going about this the wrong way. were there like known historical figures from the time that were definitely gay, or
No, just because.
No?
No, because it was so
Okay.
bad. Like, it wasn't even this adorable, like, oh, look, George is gay. That's so cute. It wasn't that. It was big bad news to be
Well, because a
known
lot
as
of
gay.
like,
yeah,
well,
of
yeah, it was
course.
almost kind of like religion was law.
It
a
was.
lot of times.
Yeah. It's not like Rome. Like, you know how you think of ancient Rome, and they actually did have.
One big party.
It was like they had sex with everyone and anyone, and being gay was okay back then. It's not like that at all. So, no, there were no people who, like, there are a lot of guesses about who is gay. I feel like, oh God, which king was it?
Alexander the Great.
No, yes, but hold on, let me message one of my friends and find out, and I'll once I hear back from him. Okay, so I found out which English king was gay, or thought of as gay. It was Edward II, and he was king in the late 1200s to mid 1300s. And he had a buddy named Pierce, who he may have been sworn brothers or he may have been his lover, but it was a pretty controversial relationship, and even then, it wasn't like out.
Gotcha.
So anyway, it is thought that it is commonly said, annoyingly, that Jane was like, "Oh, you're gay and I hate you, so I'm gonna lie and go to Cromwell and tell him that you two are having sex to get you murdered." So it all starts with their marriage. So Alison Weir is one of my other favorite historical authors, and she concluded that they had a generally unhappy marriage, primarily because George was just intensely promiscuous. He would brag. There is a quote of him bragging about deflowering virgins and taking widows and all that stuff. So that would have made for an unhappy marriage. However, I wrote he was George Clooney level promiscuous. Sorry if you're listening, George Clooney. I'm sure you're very devoted to your wife. So my thinking, though, is like during that time, everybody was kind of promiscuous. And I think it was more rare if your spouse was, or your husband, not wife, if a wife cheated, big bad. But if your husband was having an affair, this is just my guess. I feel like it was normal and you'd kind of expect it. Like, it still kind of sucked, but theirs was not a love match anyway. However, there is there's another author, Julia Fox, and she wrote the book that I gave away. She disagreed about their marriage being unhappy. They didn't end up having children, but that could have been due to myriad circumstances, not like that they just didn't have sex. It could have been simply they had issues getting pregnant. It could have been that being married as courtiers did not mean you lived together and slept together every night. And George was sent on a lot of stuff to do for the king, and Jane was always with Anne. So it could have been that they just didn't have the chance to get pregnant. So their marriage lasted for 11 years until George was beheaded, but it looked like, hold on, I lost my place. Okay, so they were married for 11 years, and then the fall of the Boleyns happened, and there are some thoughts about what role Jane played in it. They think that Jane went to Cromwell and was like, "Hey, George is having sex with Anne, and he was actually the father of Anne's miscarried, deformed fetus."
Ugh.
Yeah, and they say that she went to them and she was like, there's a lot of crap said about Jane. Hold on, my notes are kind of all over.
But you're saying that this is like the prevalent like belief of what actually happened.
Yeah, in the Victorian era, she was described as her death was a violent one, and the Victorians were like, "Well, she deserved it. That was justice."
Damn.
So they say that Jane kind of went, or they think that her involvement in Anne's downfall was due to jealousy of Anne. They think she was they think Jane was jealous of Anne's social skills and because George preferred to hang out with Anne than with Jane. And historians 100 years later were actually saying that Jane had an inveterate hatred of Anne. But that doesn't make sense. So here's why. So during Anne's queenship, Jane was kind of a confidant of Anne's. If Anne and Jane hated each other, they wouldn't have done, these things wouldn't have happened. So starting at the beginning of Anne's coronation, Jane was carrying Anne's train. She was one of the first ladies behind her, which was a position of honor. And Anne didn't have to put her there. She could have had any other number of ladies. It wasn't like a familial obligation. So there's that. So in 1534, Henry had a mistress, and Anne was upset about it.
Shock.
Right. Anne was upset about it. So she and Jane conspired together to get rid of the mistress. And
Once again, sounds like a movie idea.
Yeah. We have so many movie ideas, guys.
Man.
So she conspired with Anne to get rid of the mistress, and Anne wouldn't have gone to Jane if they hated each other. And Jane wouldn't have helped out Anne if she hated Anne. And then, there's one more. During the trial of George, it is said that Anne had told Jane that Henry had neither the skill nor the virility to please a woman.
Ooh,
And it
sick
is
burn.
generally acknowledged that Anne did say that. It's understood, and it is understood that she said that to Jane. So once again, why would Anne say that to Jane if they didn't have a decently close relationship?
Mm-hmm.
So I am not a believer that they hated each other, or even that Jane hated Anne and Anne was oblivious to it at all. Another reason I don't think Jane had anything to do with their she didn't voluntarily go to Cromwell and say, "Hey, I hate my husband. Let's tell tales," is because these were her in-laws and that was her husband. She would lose a lot. Her income married to George was a hell of a lot more than her income would be when she was a widow. So why would she lose it all by going and saying, "Hey, this happened"? So George was arrested in May of 1533, and they were executed, and so she became a widow.
So I want to get one thing straight. So you think with absolute 100% that didn't happen, the rumors between George and Anne?
Oh, gross. No, I don't believe at all that George had sex with Anne. That's horrible and disgusting, and do you want to, those rumors are based on absolutely nothing. Henry and Cromwell were desperate to get rid of Anne, and the more disgusting they made it, the better. Now so Anne had that miscarried fetus, the miscarried baby, and it was deformed. And one historian said that a miscarriage of a deformed baby like that kind of was connected to witchcraft. So they thought Anne was accused of witchcraft. And one thing that was connected to witchcraft was sexual perversion. So they're like, well, not only did she sleep with a bunch of men, but she also slept with her brother, which is the worst sexual perversion. And then on top of that, remember how Henry was like, I can't be married to Catherine of Aragon because she's my sister-in-law and that's incest and that disgusts me. Well, what better way to get Henry to be disgusted with his wife than to toss out some incest? Get it?
Fair enough.
So I don't think at all that they slept together. I think it was slander, just bullshit.
We covered that in the Anne Boleyn episode. We were talking about that, how she was pretty devout to Henry. She was with him for many years when he was still with Catherine.
10 years altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Or no, not 10 years. 8 years or so.
Something like that.
Long time.
Yeah.
So no, I don't believe it at all that they slept together. And then it doesn't help. So Anne was accused of having slept with a man named Thomas Wyatt. And Thomas was the only one accused of sleeping with her that didn't end up going to jail or going to the Tower and getting executed. He had a son, George Wyatt, and George wrote a biography of Anne, and he said that Jane was, quote unquote, a wicked wife and accuser of her husband. So a lot of the crap started then. It was like the next generation, you know? So what are you humming?
The theme of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Oh, nerd.
Sorry.
It's okay, Jeff got it.
I understood that reference.
I did not.
High five, Jeff.
Okay, so then another reason people were quick to blame Jane almost immediately after Anne's death is because Anne was very poised and graceful during her execution. And so there was a lot of sympathy for her, and they needed a villain. They couldn't accuse Henry, their king, of being dumb or...
Because he's innocent.
Right. So they needed somebody. They needed a scapegoat. So it was Jane. So as a widow, she ended up going away from court for a little while. And she had to negotiate with her father-in-law and Cromwell to get a pension so that she could support herself. So she was given, after a couple months, £100 annually. And that was enough to keep her as a noblewoman and at court. It was a fair amount. It wasn't as much as she made as George's wife, but it was enough to keep her at court.
Were there a lot of moments where noble women whose husbands had died and they weren't taken care of, they would just go back to being peasantry?
Yeah. I mean, they were very rarely peasants, but like a peasant woman is not going to marry a nobleman. But what would happen is they would end up going back to their parents' home, and if they died when they're older, if they died without children, if they died with a son and an heir, then the son and the heir would usually care for the wife, the mother.
Okay.
If not, then they might go home to their parents, and their father would renegotiate another marriage. Especially if they didn't have that kind of pension. But because Lord Morley had taken care to look into that for Jane, she was able to secure £100 annually. So she didn't have to go back to her parents. She could live on her own, which was rare, but she could. So, because she didn't have a son, when she was a widow, she couldn't benefit from any of the land. So that £100 was very important for her to have. So after a few months, she returned to be a lady in waiting to Jane Seymour. And of course, Jane Seymour died. But before she died, they apparently had a close friendship. And Jane ended up serving as her chief mourner when she died. And then came Anne of Cleves. And she was also one of her ladies in waiting. And when Henry was like, okay, I really don't want to be married to her anymore, they went to Jane to look for some info. And Jane said that the Queen had told her that they hadn't consummated their marriage.
Jane Boleyn.
Jane Boleyn.
Okay.
Jane Seymour's dead.
Okay.
So
how old is Jane Boleyn by this point?
Let's see. That was 1540, and she was about 35.
Okay.
34 or 35. So then came kind of the beginning of the end for Jane Rochford. Jane Boleyn. So she became lady in waiting to Queen Catherine. Queen Catherine was the one who had the affair and was like kind of dumb about it. So during that affair, Jane was the one who would deliver notes to Thomas Culpeper and would say, hey, I'll keep watch so you can do what you need to do. And this is another reason she has a bad reputation. Catherine Howard blamed Jane Boleyn for instigating the whole thing, but Jane Boleyn was like, she's my queen, I had to do what she said. So some people are like, oh, Jane was perverse and that's why she was doing all this, because she got some sort of sexual pleasure from helping someone else have an affair. I don't like that thinking because I don't think it's accurate. You have to remember that Catherine was the queen and Jane was her servant. And her, hold on. She was her servant and what's the word I'm looking for? Oops, sorry, Jeff. She was, her subject. So, like, she couldn't say no. If your queen tells you, hey, go get Thomas Culpeper, you're going to be like, okay. Like, there's no not doing it. Mm-hmm. So, I also believe that Jane was just doing what she was told. I know that's not a good argument, but, like, you don't say no in those days to the queen. So, some people think, like I said, some people think that she was just like getting her own sick pleasure out of it. Some people think that she was just a backstabber and she liked causing other people pain, and she knew this Thomas Culpeper thing would cause pain for both Catherine Howard and the king. I don't think it's that complicated. I think Jane Boleyn was told to deliver a letter to Thomas Culpeper and then told, please wait while Thomas Culpeper arrives. I don't think we need to overcomplicate it. But once again, because people have been saying for hundreds of years that she's this horrible, treacherous woman, that kind of sticks with her. So when it was discovered that Catherine had been having an affair, Jane was detained and questioned, and eventually she was arrested because of the role she played in it, which she absolutely played a role. There's no guessing about that. She ended up having a full nervous breakdown, and she was declared legally insane in the end of 1542. So normally you can't execute someone who's legally insane. However, because Henry was the king, he was like, I do what I want, and then he was like, kill her anyway. So he said it was okay to execute someone who was insane if they had been if they'd been convicted of high treason, which she was. So, okay, so an act of attainder was passed against her, and the act actually calls her that Bawd. So people really didn't like her even then.
That what?
Bawd, B-A-W-D. That's like.
What does that mean?
I know what it means, but I can't describe it. So give me half a minute.
I know what it means to be bawdy.
It's like that, Bawd, a woman in charge of a brothel.
Gotcha.
So so on February 13th of 1542, Catherine Howard was executed first, and then Jane Boleyn went out, and on the freshly used scaffold, she made a speech, which was pretty normal for that time period. It was, I'm a sinner, the king is just, I deserve to be here. And you kind of always said that, no matter what. Like, you never said, I'm still innocent. You never said anything like that. The king is just because he's giving you a beheading instead of burning. And
nobody had the balls to go up there and just be like, fuck the king.
No. And she was executed and buried next to next to Catherine, but near George and Anne.
Okay.
So some people, once again, suck, and they're still presenting the notion that at her speech on the scaffold, she said, "Oh, by the way, I totally accused George of being a homosexual," and that's about as false as saying. People also suggest that Catherine Howard said, "I die a queen, but I'd rather die the wife of Thomas Culpeper." It's not true. Neither things were said. Jane never confessed to anything because she didn't do it. But let's get back a little bit to George's trial. So part of the reason it came out that maybe Jane was involved in the accusations is because at George's trial, he said, "On the evidence of only one woman, you are willing to believe this great evil of me, and on this basis of her allegations, you are deciding my judgment." For some reason, people assumed that meant Jane, but there is a letter. Julia Fox suggests that it was another woman, specifically Bridget Wakefield, and there's some sort of letter that involves her, and I just remembered it again, so I can't give too much details, but essentially the quote one woman is what people are like, oh, that obviously means Jane. So it's kind of crap. So that Bawd. When George was actually in the Tower, Jane Boleyn wrote to him and said that she was going to beg Henry to spare him. So, like, if she was purposely going against George, why would she then write a letter and say, by the way, I'll help you? So just, I don't buy that Jane purposely. She had been questioned, absolutely, but the kind of interrogations that they had, they were like given no chance to think. It was just like, tell us everything and anything you know. So she might have said something that could have insinuated something or backed somebody else's crappy statement up, but it could have been simply like, oh, George and Anne hang out a lot. They're very close, which they were siblings. So, yeah. So anyway, that's that about that. Trying to see if I have any other notes. I am getting irritated with reading people. Like when I was researching this, some website outright stated Jane implied that George was the father of Anne's deformed child. And they're presenting that as fact, not something that was guessed. So that kind of irritates me that this kind of information is still going around. Although Julia Fox is the only biographer I know of who's actually defensive of Jane and paints her in a different light, so I guess it shouldn't be that upset. So, I think that covers it for Jane. Yep.
Well, all right.
Unless you want to talk a little bit about her religion, but it wasn't too important.
It's whatever you want.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah.
So, that's Jane.
That's Jane. Jane, the infamous Lady Rochford.
Yeah.
That one book you like.
It is a very good book. I highly recommend it to everybody. I hope our winner is enjoying it. Okay, so do you guys have any questions about Jane?
I'm trying to think. So there's nothing that gives you like pause or anything. You're like, well, maybe she did do this.
Not
in terms of like her accusations.
I think she did a lot, but I don't think she did it vindictively.
Okay.
Like, that's the thing. Is people look at her as this vindictive, spiteful, hateful woman, and I don't think she was. I think she was a servant and.
Is there a possibility that she knew what was going on with George and Anne, and she was totally cool with it up until a point, and then she's like, "Wait, no, this is."
No.
And she decided to do something. You don't think that could have been a thing?
No. There's no. No. She just didn't have any reason to support shitting all over George and Anne like that. Like, even if, like, the only reason I could think of was if she was like, I am especially religious and this offends my faith and I am so morally aware of it that I cannot allow it to continue. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing about her. Two articles suggest different things about her religion, so I guess we are going to talk about this. One says that she and George were on opposite ends of the religious spectrum in terms of that time period. So George was very anti-Pope and pro-Reformation. And it said that Jane's family was very Catholic. But I actually saw a second thing, and it said Lord Morley, who was Jane's father, he was anti-Pope, and he actually wrote pieces for Henry about, you know, the evils of the Bishop of Rome and all that stuff. So I don't think it's likely that she was especially Catholic and George wasn't. And so she was just like, oh, I can't tolerate this moral sin, especially when later on she did help Catherine have an affair. So I don't think there's any chance. It's like the rumors about George being gay. They're so flimsy, and they come. I think I've told you this before. The George being gay rumors all started because he and Mark Smeaton shared a book. That's it. And then people were like, "Oh, well, he confessed when he was taken to the block that he was gay." No, he did not.
So you're just convinced it's 100% a smear job?
On Jane, yeah. I think she did some stuff, and I think she screwed up, but I don't think she's vindictive or evil. She had no gains from it. Like, I would get it if she had been having an affair, or if there had been another marriage match that she possibly could have made that would have ended up with her wealthier. But as a woman in those days, you relied on your father and your husband to support you. You very rarely made any sort of money on your own. Not enough to support you anyway. So I think I read that she and George had an annual income of like £1,000. So why would she take a 90% cut when she wasn't even sure she would get anything by becoming a widow? She had to fight to get her £100. So it doesn't make sense to me at all. Why would I tell the world that Jeff was doing something that would get him executed and make me a poor widow who had no prospects? And on top of that, like, a lot of the smear campaign came like a generation later, but she was still poorly thought of in that time. She didn't marry again. Mm-hmm. So, like, yeah. That's why I really like the Julia Fox book. It's because, like, I thought Jane was this mean wife who did a lot of crap, and this provided real evidence, like her being in Anne's coronation, that support that they did have a good relationship. And even if even if Jane and George did have an unhappy marriage, it could have been a neutral marriage. They were just like, okay. I don't think it was a happy one, but unhappy doesn't mean hateful.
Gotcha.
So.
Well, all right.
She's my favorite. In case you couldn't tell.
Well, thank you very much for that, Emily.
You are most welcome.
That was a good one.
Thank you.
You finally got that out of your system. I feel like you've been chomping at the bit for that one for a while.
I have been. And I'm really excited. I have a book recommendation if anybody wants it. I wrote the title down. And it's not about Jane Boleyn. It's called The Rise and Fall of Anne Boleyn. And I'm only recommending it because it sounds really interesting to me. I haven't read it yet, so I can't even promise it's good. But I saw some sites that quoted that book, and I think it looks really interesting. So check out The Rise and Fall of Anne Boleyn. So, I know I've talked about Nonsuch Palace and how long that took to be completed.
That sounds like a silly place where, like, it sounds like a silly convent. Nonsuch.
It was a pun. Henry wanted a castle, a palace, and there would be none such as this palace.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Henry. Okay, there's
and the whole
your
kingdom
silly Henry facts.
What did you say, Garrett?
There's your silly Henry fact for the day.
Oh, actually, I do have a silly Henry fact.
Besides the blowing up in his casket?
Bring that one up, too, because we need to talk about that.
I actually was listening to a podcast last week, and I heard that, and then I didn't look after it. And in the podcast, they said it's a story, so it can't be confirmed, but it could have happened.
Well, what we're talking about is Emily posted something on the Facebook where there was a rumor that when Henry VIII was put into his casket, he burst open.
He exploded.
Ugh.
Now, is this because it was too
Like
small
a
of a
beached
casket?
whale.
No, because he was just full of gas.
Woo! Woo! That's just air escaping from his
I imagine
mouth.
him just farting a bunch.
Yeah. Well, it's apparently on unrealfacts.com.
So it's got to be true.
Hold on.
Would the internet lie?
Okay. Well, they've got sources. Okay, but anyway, my fun fact about Henry, this is from another podcast I listened to last summer, and I'm sorry if I've actually said this one before. Once again, I can't 100% confirm it, but the podcast was History Extra, and a Henry VIII historian was talking about it. Apparently, Henry VIII had a blood clot in his face, and it turned his face black.
I feel like we may have heard this, but that's still pretty good.
It's still pretty good. It is, isn't it? Okay, a macabre tale of the death and burial of Henry VIII. Go away. Stop seeing this ad. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. I don't want your ads.
Are you fighting with technology?
Technology's fighting me. Okay. Cruelest tyrants, distortion of Christianity, people feared him. Nobody told him he was dying because it was illegal. Did I not tell you that?
I don't think so.
It was illegal to foretell the death of the king. It was treason. So when he was dying, everybody was like, I can't fucking tell him. It's treasonous.
You're in good health, but he's like, thanks, I appreciate it.
Thanks to deniability, I'm invincible.
Why is my face black? Also, he sounds like Buffalo Bob. Put the lotion in the basket.
Haha. The black marble sarcophagus, once designed for Henry VIII, which he in turn had confiscated from Cardinal Wolsey. Oh, what a dick. Now adorns Lord Nelson's tomb in St. Paul's Cathedral. Henry's burial outside of London. His people hated him. What? There might have been open rebellion had the dead king been buried with honor in Westminster. I don't know about that.
So is his grave marked? Like, you could go there?
Yeah.
Do you want to make a road trip?
Yes.
She's brought this up so many times. So, yeah.
And then we do a live podcast from his grave.
Stop. Yes.
That's where we talk about the ghost episodes of.
I'm so excited for the
Tutors.
ghost episode, guys. How many people came out to pay respects? And those who did
Ghost
agreed to the coffin
tutors.
out of fear. Most of the mourners were paid. Henry's domestic staff, boys who worked in the kitchen, women who washed his laundry, decked in specially made black outfits. These servants hauled the king, walked it with its body all the way. Lead coffin, which was carried on a lavishly decorated chariot, had an effigy of Henry. The representation was so convincing that many thought it was really him. Priests would greet the king's coffin as it passed their churches, sprinkling it with holy water. Bishops stationed them to offer masses for a soul. Henry's cortege was surrounded by banners displaying images of the saints. Such a demanding email that had twisted Henry VIII's man, so tried at the end of his life that he seemed convinced he would assert his devotion to the Virgin Mary on the one hand, whilst also desecrating blah, blah, blah. His procession stopped for a night, 8 miles out from London. Given it to his in-laws, the steamer he had often pilgrimed. The tongues of your dogs take a share of the foe. After the Bishop of London offered mass for a soul, some attendants noticed that Henry's lead coffin had been damaged during the night, either because of the weight of the effigy and other decorations or because the king's body had exploded. It was extremely bloated and had entered into an advanced state of putrefaction. The casket seemed to have opened, expanded, and opened up. They also noticed the rotting stench that filled Sion's old chapel as the king and a liquid that looked like blood had also seeped onto the stone floor.
Oh,
Oh my
Get down,
God,
he's
it's
gonna blow.
It's getting worse, guys. Both the foul smell and the bloody pus discharging from his suppurating body was too gruesome for public display. So it was
just so everyone knows, it's going to get pretty gross here.
So it was decided to find local plumbers to solder the lead coffin's joints before the final procession. Oh no! Oh God! On the evidence of one of
Please.
these plumbers, as well as other witnesses, we know that when the king's casket was being repaired, a dog ran under the coffin and began licking up the stuff.
Yes. Oh.
Here's an eyewitness quote. The pavement of the church was wetted with Henry's blood. In the morning came plumbers to solder the coffin, under whose feet was suddenly seen a dog creeping and licking up the king's blood.
Oh. I didn't think it could have gotten worse.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Holy hell.
There's your fun fact.
Here's your gross-ass Henry fact for the day. Holy crow.
That's really gross. So I'm disgusted.
Yeah, me too. I hope you guys enjoyed this during your breakfast.
Good morning. Here's your gross fact of the day.
It's at the end of the episode.
Yeah. Hopefully they've already eaten by now.
Ew, stop.
Ooh, anyway.
Follow us on Facebook. Bye.
Bye-bye.
For more really disgusting facts. His black face and his leaking body.
Also, if you guys have any great Henry facts that you know that we haven't brought up yet, let us know on that Facebook or on our Twitter.
And we'll share it on
Actually,
the podcast.
guys, I have a question for you and our listeners. One of my favorite podcasts just did a Q&A session. And I know we've asked our listeners for suggestions on episodes and any questions they had, but I'm kind of wondering, do you think a Q&A episode might be interesting?
I was actually going to say this earlier. Oh, my God. It's like we finish each other's...
Sandwiches. Soviet Union debates.
I was actually going to say, like, we should either at the end of an episode every once in a while, like, put out the call on Facebook, give it, like, 10 minutes and see if anybody responds, has any questions they want to ask.
I'll put up a thing on Facebook and ask for questions, and the next time we can record, if we have any, we'll answer some.
Okay.
I like that idea. I hope we get some questions. And
Me
like it can be
too.
about us or it can be about what we know about Henry VIII. I'm pretty open for all of it. Or book recommendations or anything like that. So, cool. Hey guys, follow us on Twitter at TutorKnowHer. It's where I retweet a lot of stuff from other people and occasionally share interesting stuff. And on Facebook, actually, it's where we're most active. You guys can message us, ask us questions, offer suggestions. We post some facts about what's happening today in Tudor history, all that stuff. Also, hold on, let me check. This episode is going out. Oh, no. So for our Anne Boleyn fans, this is the week of her execution and... trial and execution. So I'll be sharing some stuff about that as well this week. So follow us and engage with us and love us and share us. And our Facebook page is just Tudor I Hardly Know Her. I also share information from other Tudor pages, so you could find more Tudor stuff to obsess over if you're like me. So
Yeah.
we're good?
We're good.
We're good.
All right.
Until next time.
Divorced, beheaded, died.
Divorced, beheaded, survived. Goodbye, guys.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.